So what more can you throw at Max Verstappen, huh? A failed DRS swing, his teammate not willing to cooperate initially, and a very, very difficult battle against George Russell. This guy can do it all. But yes, it might have taken a DNF from Charles Leclerc, but what a win it was by Max Verstappen here. Not here at the Circuit Barcelona-Catalunya, but there at the Circuit Barcelona-Catalunya. But must have been an amazing race weekend to visit because there's so much of energy and so much of content to talk about from this entire weekend. And that's exactly what we're going to do right here on this episode of the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pistoporium. This is our Spanish Grand Prix race review right here. And after a quick break, we'll be back with who we are firstly and also what we're going to discuss in this particular episode. Welcome back, folks. Welcome in. My name is Somal Arora. I'm the host of The Driving Force on Disney Plus Hotstar, joined by Kunal Shah, the former marketing head of the Force India F1 team. And straight away, Kunal, I just have to ask this one question. Is it too early for team honors? Because come on, what is it? Grand Prix number 7? I suppose we have this discussion every single time around race 7, race 10 about team orders and whether it's too early to do them. This time it's Red Bull instead of Mercedes. Distasteful, or perhaps just making sure that they get the most points in the bag. And when you consider that Max is now leading the championship, makes sense, doesn't it?
Well, you said race 7 instead of race 6, and now I'm just going to say that's it. Let's end the episode. We got to redo the whole thing, Sommel, and let's see you in Monaco, I guess, right? And maybe I tried to sound a little bit like Lewis Hamilton, on the opening lap when he said, "Let's park it all up." But Sommel, maybe you also need to hit the mute button and then the record button, and you need to type a few things. And now I sound like GP, Max Verstappen's race engineer, giving all those information, but. It's a valid question to ask. Should they have run team orders? Should they not? Sometimes the easiest way I can give an answer is if I was Christian Horner, I would have run team orders. Like I said in the preview, I'm going to repeat it in the review as well. Sergio Perez not only gave up the race win, but he is, of course, giving Max Verstappen another chance to go up and win a world title. Their nearest rivals were out unexpectedly. They were, Charles Leclerc was supposed to cruise and win this race, right? But on a day when he was scoring 0, it's absolutely understandable that they maximized all the points for Max Verstappen. And they gave him 7 more points, I would say, instead of 8. I think they would have gone for the fastest lap at some point, but they just didn't want to risk it. They didn't want to get too greedy, I guess.
Well, you could say they literally maximized the points. And I suppose that'll be a word that kind of troubles Sergio Perez for the next couple of days. But considering how things are going, Kunal, considering how early in the season it is, and considering how early Red Bull have actually pressed the team order button, I suppose it's fair to say that Sergio Perez might never win a race for Red Bull unless Max retires. What would you say about this claim? Because I just don't see it happening. They denied him a race win last time out in Mexico City last year. Of course, that's understandable, championship fight and everything happening, but this is so early in the year. And it's not like Max was clearly the faster car, right? Sergio did not have that DRS problem. Of course, without that, Max could have been faster, but again, you've got to look at what you have on the table. And Sergio was faster, quite clearly. I mean, at one point, he literally radioed in to say, get Max out of the way. I want to be the one to pass George Russell. And he could have well done that. So, I don't know. I get a feeling that his last race win, if it ever is to come, is going to happen when Max retires. And that's such a shame.
Or if Max is out of the podium finishes or something. But again, a good way to try and understand the situation is let's discuss. Was this Perez's race to win, right? He had a car that did not have problems. He raced on merit all the way up to, the lead of the race, etc., etc. But was it really his race to win? And the truth is, if you want to say from the heart, yes, he was the leader. Max had his problems. Even if Max was on a different strategy, would Max have been able to overtake him without the DRS and so on? And you can go on and on down that road. But Max was on the quicker strategy per se. And as teammates, Red Bull just said, you know what? Race 1, race 6 or race 16, they're not going to race. And that's the decision that they've taken. And that's just what the sport allows as well, right? And I'll also put it this way. Let's reverse the question. If Perez anyway was able to attack Max, and Max's DRS was broken, right? And if the Mercedes or the Ferraris were coming in heavy in assault from positions 3, Red Bull wouldn't have swapped the two and told Max to go and told Perez to take the win. They would have told Perez to play the able wingman that he is. So in both situations, Perez would not have been able to win the race, or would not have been allowed to win the race. And that's where I totally agree with you. I don't think Checo will ever get to win a race unless Perez retires. And that's the unfortunate truth of being the number 2 driver at Red Bull Racing, Samal.
It's such a shame, really, and you've got to wonder, right, at some point, can they ever let them race? And I've been seeing comparisons from many people. Lots of people have been posting tweets about 2014 Bahrain, Mercedes, about them letting their teammates race. But I suppose you've got to understand Red Bull from this perspective, because they don't have the cushion that Mercedes had in 2014, so they've got to do what they have to do to make sure that Max gets a second world title, and it's totally fair in that sense of the way. But my word, Kunal, did it get really frustrating. And I just have to ask the question, are we being robbed of a Perez versus Verstappen battle at the end of the day? Because, come on, that would be fun on merit, isn't it? Because Perez is getting better this year. He is more comfortable with that car. We all want to see him go and fight for wins on merit, and maybe do so against an able teammate. This is just something we're not going to get to see, I suppose.
That's a very interesting question, Samuel, because last year, the two most important races where we celebrated Checo Perez as the wingman was first in Turkey, where he was battling Lewis Hamilton, and then the second time in Abu Dhabi, where he, of course, held Hamilton back. And we all know what he did there, right? Now, imagine Hamilton, who is known to be one of the best overtakers of his generation, right? Checo was able to put up such a strong defense in front of Lewis Hamilton. Now, I would have loved to see Checo do the same thing to Max Verstappen, who's, of course, known to be probably a better overtaker, a more aggressive overtaker than even Lewis Hamilton. And that, to me, is entertainment robbed. Absolutely, Samal. I really wish to see both of them in that Red Bull go wheel to wheel. Maybe they'll allow that after the World Championship is settled. Who knows? And, given the rate at which it's going, we may have a 22-race calendar, but I don't think the World Championship could probably go down to the line. Of course, I'm, jumping the gun here, but just, emphasizing on the situation that the only time the two drivers may be allowed to fight is if Red Bull settles the deal much earlier in the season.
Yeah, come on, Formula One. Put a rule in there. Just say that only beyond round 10 can you actually use team orders, because it's frustrating. You come into a new season, you're wondering, oh, well, things will be different. We'll get to see new rivalries. 6 or 7 races later, every single year, just get to this point and be asked the same question every year. But it's kind of true, right? It's the same old discussion that revolves around with different characters, and that's what kind of adds layers. But I wonder about the DRS canal, because Max Verstappen had this frustrating issue. I mean, I read this article a couple of years ago that a couple of engineers from Mercedes had actually jumped ship from Mercedes to go to Red Bull Racing, and also quite a few of them were aerodynamicists in that sense. So was their DRS also working for Mercedes per se? And also, on a more serious note, why did Perez not have the same issue that Max had?
Helmut Marko actually explained this very well, and this is again where Checo Perez's performance sort of stands out for me. So it seems that Red Bull's upgrades, the weight-saving upgrades that they brought to Spain, were only on Max Verstappen's car, which then also means that Checo was driving a heavier car, which didn't have the problems, but was still fighting to be in the lead of the race, which speaks volumes for the performance he actually brought. So Checo had a heavier car, which did not have the DRS problem, whereas Max, who had the upgraded and the lighter car, actually had those DRS problems. But that's where it is. The other issue we should talk about was how Max almost did not start the 2022 Spanish Grand Prix. He left the pit lane literally with 2 or maybe 3 seconds to spare. And as we got to know post-race, Red Bull was facing from fuel temperature issues, just the way Aston Martin was, facing that in Miami as well. So that's another regulation that sort of has been changed midway through the season. And Max almost did not make it to the start grid. I remember seeing, I said, oh my God, why is Max still sitting in the car? Why are the tire warmers still on the car? Isn't it just time to go out? So that was one of those issues that happened pre-race for them as well. So all in all, of course, now the question is, had he not left the pits on time, would he have not started the race? No, that then he had the option to start the race, but from the pit lane. So he wouldn't have had a front row start as he did for the race yesterday.
Actually, I wouldn't mind that, because that would literally mean we get to see Verstappen and Alonso starting from the back of the grid and climbing all the way up, and then potentially a George Russell win, which I think is a long time coming, I suppose. So that will be fun. But we'll get to Mercedes and Russell in a second, but we have to talk about Formula One and this whole new package of cars. And we said in the preview, Kunal, that this will be their biggest test yet, because all the other races, we've kind of expected good races over there at circuits like Melbourne, circuits like Bahrain. It's the Spain and the Monacos of this world that you want to make interesting. And I suppose it's a good time to call the 2022 cars a success, because they ended up making Spain a really good race. Or was it all to do with the cars, or was it just artificial drama instilled by Verstappen's DRS not working? What would you put in that sense? I'd say the latter, actually. I think the cars were all right, but you could see that they were being affected quite a fair bit by the tyre degradation air and also the dirty air, because some of the cars really got loose in the middle of the corner. But what is your take on this matter?
I actually love that. Cars getting loose in the middle of the corner, cars missing the exits and going off to the gravel and so on. And that just shows how hard the drivers anyway have to work. But you asked a very interesting question, Saumil. Did Max's DRS not working make the race actually a little more interesting? And I think absolutely yes. In fact, the Verstappen versus Russell battle speaks in favor of dropping the DRS, if you were to ask me, because it addressed two things. First is the driver chasing actually had to work very hard to make the overtake happen. And of course, hence the driver who was being chased wasn't just a sitting duck. And case in point, when Verstappen was trying to overtake Russell, the two drivers seemed on equal footing, so to say. Verstappen with a faster car, but Russell with track position, and they were both trying to use their, use their situation to their own merit. Whereas when Perez came to overtake George Russell, he was a sitting duck. He just opened the wing and drove past. So in my view, the 2022 Spanish Grand Prix also made a case for dropping the DRS. Now, if there wasn't a DRS, we wouldn't have seen George Russell versus Max Verstappen battle through all those number of laps through the race, Saumil.
Yep, correct. 100% correct. And it just makes you wonder, right? Is it really helping the spectacle? Of course, at sometimes you really need it. But in that particular case, Kunal, dare I say it felt old school? It felt like you had to fight for your positions. And that is just basic stuff, right? Isn't this what Formula One is all about? Just watching two cars going at it completely, peak technological prowess of both the teams, and then you get to see such amazing racing. It's tremendous how that battle eventually worked out. But that was in the midst of a live call center call, a tech support call as well, because Red Bull Racing were really hammering in the instructions. Like, Max, you can only press the button once, not 3 times. Press it after the curbing, X and Y. I mean, come on, what more can you throw at Max Verstappen, right? But I think this is a race for the race engineers, because both GP and Bono did a great job at controlling their drivers, because in the heat, in the middle of their circumstances, my word, that must be a hard task.
It must have been a hard task. And the next thing Red Bull Racing is going to do to sort of adjust some spending in the budget cap, and this is breaking news, guys, okay? They are going to outsource the call center to the Far East or to an Indian IT services company, so that the per minute of calling rates are actually cheaper, right? Teams will do what it takes to actually fall under the budget cap. But no, on a more serious note, I also liked how GP was, trying to tell the FIA by actually telling Max Verstappen, we see that George is moving in the braking zone. You're telling the world champion, what's actually happening ahead of him, when that's all he's actually focused on, the driver ahead of him. But I think maybe Red Bull Racing missed Michael Massey a little bit, in the older era, which was literally just last year. We would have had the conversations between the team bosses and Michael saying, your driver's moving too much. And then Michael would have said, yeah, that's called motor racing. Jonathan, maybe something like that would have happened.
Yeah, I actually want to see a video of all the race engineers just sitting on the pit wall, especially Red Bull and Mercedes, and just seeing how fidgety they get with their buttons every single time their drivers are involved in any sort of battle, because they just might feel the urge, let's dial the FIA, let's do something about that over here. And then they might have to realize, that number's blocked. We can't do that anymore. It's ridiculous how that rule has changed now. It's actually made the broadcast better, but I suppose that's not the primary subject of this episode. So let's not dive too much into that. What we should do, Kunal, is rate the race, because we've had this chat about the new cars and whether this race was artificially kind of made exciting by Verstappen not having the DRS. I suppose I'd give it a solid 8. Really fun race to watch. Yes, it tailed off in the second half, but I think that first half made up for it.
I would say it was a 10 on 10 for me, I think it was one of those old school races at an old school circuit like Circuit de Catalunya-Barcelona, or is it Catalunya-Barcelona? But either way, it's the Spanish Grand Prix we're talking about. And to me, it was a race of strategy. It was a race of reliability. It was like the good old days where the drivers were pushing too much and the cars were just blowing up. And that's literally what was happening, because all three of the top teams had a reliability issue. Red Bull with the DRS problem, Mercedes with the water leak, and then power unit issues for Ferrari as well. So to me, it was a very good race. And I'm actually very, very glad, because I was fearing the reverse might happen, where the drivers would just sit behind each other and wait for the others to make a mistake. And I must say that, the likes of Red Bull and the likes of Mercedes actually forced different strategy options for the top teams. So by switching, Max to a soft tire in the middle stint, or by Lewis actually having the soft tire in his early first stint and so on, they said, you know what, we're going to go hammer and tongs to this race and get as many points, because instead of just preserving the tires, let's do the exact opposite. Let's just have everybody blow their tires up all they can. And that's pretty much what happened.
But it's good in a way, isn't it? High deck races are fun in how limited they are, I suppose, because we don't want an era like 2012, 2013, right, where you have too much of high deck, and the whole point becomes, well, it's so high deck that you actually should focus too much on saving. And I suppose it's good to have one in every 5 or 6 races like this one. Again, it's all dependent on circuit characteristics, but it was fun the way it played out actually in the end. And I suppose this is an 80s Formula One race with a more modern twist, and what could be better than that? Because that era was so much fun in terms of the reliability, the rivalries, the intensity. It's just perfect. Formula One is having a really, really good time right now. But we want to talk about the top performers from this week, Kunal, and I suppose that leads us on very conveniently onto the 8 sleep performers of the week. And I know we have to talk about the Mercedes folks, but I just want to speak about Charles Leclerc here over for a second, because there's literally nothing that he did wrong. In terms of his qualifying lap, spot on. Yes, Verstappen's DRS issue helped him, but his start was perfect. His drive up to that point was perfect. Right, what is it? Less than halfway through, and he had a 30-second gap, Kunal. That is just some ridiculous stuff. And the way he treated his team afterwards in the media as well was pretty gentlemanlike. So I suppose all round, this guy just didn't do anything wrong this weekend.
He definitely tops the list of 8 sleep performers of the race, Somil. This was a race for him to win. After getting a splendid pole on Saturday, he was controlling up at the front. Of course, he was helped by Max Verstappen's uncharacteristic spin at turn 4 as well, which was, down to the gust of wind as it was revealed post-race. So, yes, he definitely is somebody who deserves to be on this list, on the top of this list, since he didn't get onto the top of the podium, the top step of the podium yesterday, right? But my list, of course, then includes George Russell as well. Again, we're going to have a stats review by F1 Stats Guru Sundaram in some time, but the only driver to continue to have top 5 finishes on Sundays. He's no longer just missed a Saturday, he's missed a Sunday as well, Somil. And I have to say, the other 8 sleep performers of the race have to be the Red Bull strategy team, because they used strategy very well to jump George Russell, for at least in the case of Max Verstappen, and then they did the swaps between Perez and Verstappen when they had to make sure that Max Verstappen won the race, because Verstappen won without a working DRS but with a very, very functional wingman. So you need a bit of both sometimes to go and...
Oh, come on. You can't let that comment slide like that. That's a good one, Kunal. That's actually a very well thought out one.
Thank you. But yes, then of course the other person I would say who needs to be on the 8th performers of the race is Pete Bonington, or who we know very fondly as Bono, because had it not been for Bono, maybe Lewis Hamilton would have parked up after lap 2, or maybe was it lap 3? I don't even know, Samuel.
Yeah, I think lap 3 it was, but did it really dampen the race for you, Kunal? Because I think that was the first time that I've heard Lewis Hamilton properly give up on a race. Now, again, I've been watching since Lewis Hamilton's first year properly, so you can. Again, I was just 5 years old at that point, but still, I've never quite heard him ever just throw in the towel like that, at least verbally. But I suppose it's human at the end of the day, isn't it? Because everyone at some point feels like, the challenge is a bit too big. And now we're just becoming the Inside Line F1 Philosophy podcast. But more on that later on. The point is, it takes the engineer to pick you back up. And that's what the team is there for. And my word, Kunal, because Hamilton can throw in the tantrums. We've seen that time and again. But to handle him so well, so calmly, I think it's just excellent. To see what Bono is doing is a bit of an underrated job, to be very honest.
Underrated, absolutely. I mean, imagine two things about Lewis Hamilton's race that we should ask a question about. Now, imagine if he actually parked that car after the first 3 or 4 laps just to save the engine. We would have been robbed of what was a P4 for Lewis. And that would have meant, I think, 3 races out of 6 where the Mercedes would have finished 3 and 4 in the season, and George ahead of Lewis. And I think that charge was fantastic because lots of data has been pulled out. Lewis was doing fastest laps after fastest laps for a really long time. He made that strategy work, which is something he's been doing all his career, right, Samuel? And so that would have been one thing. Had he parked that car, we wouldn't have seen a recovery comeback. And mind you, his recovery comeback actually was not aided by the safety car. There wasn't a safety car in a race for the first time in 2022, right? So he made that recovery purely based on pace. Okay. And then the second thing, which I really think would have changed Lewis's race, and maybe he would have been on the podium given all that transpired, right, was that he was the only driver to have started on the medium tire. He was the only driver on the alternate strategy, right? Now, if Kevin Magnussen and Lewis Hamilton hadn't come together when they did at turn 4 or whatever that corner was in the opening lap, maybe Lewis would have run an even more different strategy to climb up through the podium. Because, Mercedes has been, praising Lewis about the fact that he was 40 seconds down at the, at the start of his incident, and how he climbed back up and finished some, 10 seconds off someone or something. But overall, I think Lewis Hamilton did a great job, and hats off to Bono for, kicking him on the backside when he had to in a very nice way to say, no, Lewis, you're going to keep going.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone needs someone like that at some point. But yeah, ridiculous how all that transpired. And what if Lewis didn't have that incident in the first lap? Things would have been interesting. And I suppose Mercedes can take that liberty in terms of strategy because they know that at least now, Kunal, it seems like they're in a league of their own, which isn't a good thing. It's just Red Bull from a couple of years ago, isn't it? Where the top teams are a bit too far off. The bottom teams are a bit too far off as well. They're just stuck languishing in the middle. But I suppose we've got to wonder, has the pecking order changed? Are Mercedes there or thereabouts yet? We can see that it's a big step, but I'm not sure if Mercedes are right there to fight for wins. And I think the best way to sum it up would be, just as I said a second ago, Red Bull from 2018 or 2017, I suppose. Yeah,
and, I'll put it this way. I think, when the race was running normally before, Charles Leclerc's issues, Mercedes was really way back off that pace. I don't remember my notes, but I'm sure it's there somewhere. By the end of it, when Mercedes actually finished the race, they finished 32 seconds behind Max Verstappen. So all in all, they seemed to have made progress, but not really when the numbers mattered. Again, we're going to dig some more data through this week. So when it comes to Monaco, we will have more to speak about. But I think there are two things that normally happened, in my view, Sommel. First is Toto Wolff saying our deficit was 1 second and we cut that down to half a second in Spain. So let's go and, confirm or reject that hypothesis, right? That's what we're going to do before Monaco. And then the second part is, I think Mercedes overall realized that there is a lot of negative PR and talk about their season. So they turned it around and said, everybody's only supposed to say positive things about what's happening because we are working hard, as we should. Because, George Russell said things like, this is where our season starts. And Lewis Hamilton was like, oh my God, wow, the car feels great. And yes, the one thing that was visible as well is that porpoising that they suffered in the straights was visually not evident when we were seeing the onboards. Yes, they faced it at different parts of the circuit during the cornering and so on. But let's remember, porpoising is not something that can get eliminated 100%. So you got to find something that's a good balance between comfort, performance, and what your driver also prefers.
I suppose many teams have done that, because this weekend I couldn't quite spot a lot of porpoising all the way through. So it's interesting to see what they've done. I suppose we can't quite get an idea right now, but maybe 15 years later, when an engineer writes a book, maybe they'll tell us exactly what they did, right? So let's wait and see how that plays out eventually. But folks, now it's time for a segment that we really love right here at the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits to Podium to return. It's time for the stats review with F1 Stats Guru that's going to be coming up right here, right now. I really missed it. Let's go. So, folks, on the video, in case you want to listen to it properly, I suppose the best way to do that would be to check out the Inside Line F1 podcast, but should be back in a second with the normal episode coming up right here. And there we are, folks. Thank you so much, Sundaram. Wow, it's great to have you on once again. It's been a long time since we actually had this segment, but so refreshing to hear him on the podcast once again. And the stat that he mentioned about George Russell, Kunal, about him being the only driver to complete 100% of all the laps. Well, until last week, Leclerc was a part of that list as well. So is that a bit of a jinx for Monaco? Or what is it?
Charles Leclerc was on a 16-race finishing streak, which also ended in Spain. So, but yeah, I think Mr. Consistency, this is what, George Russell was brought in for. It's like nobody misses Valtteri Bottas at Mercedes anymore. George is sort of fitted in gears synchronizing each other as they should, in the car, right? So to me, I think it's pretty fantastic. And then I'm eager to see if Max Verstappen actually keeps building onto this stat of every race he's finished first. And it's only the second time in his career he scored a hat-trick of wins. And will he add more through the season? And when I say through the season, literally for that, he needs to go win in Monaco as well, Somil.
I just get a feeling he will, but I'll save my reasoning for that for the Monaco GP preview. That's going to come up rather soon, right here on the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits to Podium. But, well, I think it's time to head to the Carlos Sainz sympathy corner again, Kunal, because it's that time of the weekend once again. We just sit down for the race review. 20 minutes into the episode, we've spoken about every other protagonist, and then we come to Carlos Sainz, and then we say, come on. At one point, when a spin firstly came about, I thought, well, I suppose it's the win working for Mercedes. That's what I thought, because then Verstappen had his DRS issues. I thought, well, the DRS is also working for Mercedes. But it just was bad luck, I suppose, being caught out by the wind at that particular point of time. But more than bad luck as well, he didn't quite do much to recover from his race, because Hamilton had a worse issue, and he only ended up finishing slightly behind Carlos Sainz in a car that we know for a fact is slower than him. So there is something really going on here. Is his season over in a way? Are Ferrari already looking at him as number 2?
Well, if Red Bull has already started to play team orders, okay, and Max is, of course, now taken the lead, Charles is trailing, etc., I won't be surprised if Ferrari are going to consider team orders as well. And these are two teams that have been very, very ruthless with team orders throughout the history of them being racing in Formula One. So to me, Carlos Sainz could have actually won his home race in Spain, Somel. He was starting from row 2. He had a bad start. Then he had that uncharacteristic spin. He, of course, had some floor damage as well, which was costing him some performance. I think that's what the team said. But the truth is that I don't know what needs to change. Maybe he keeps saying he's not comfortable in the car. He's struggling with balance this season, and that's not helping him go. But I think it's also this thing of, when you have a winning car under you, you also need to sort of activate that winning mentality. And that's what we've seen Charles Leclerc do with just so much ease this season. And I really hope that the Sainz gene in Carlos kicks in, given all the legendary Sainz racing, wisdom that he would naturally come with.
Yeah, I hope all the signs point towards Sainz winning one race at least. But are you paraphrasing to say he's not used to winning, Kunal? I know I put you in a bit of a spot right now. It's a tough question to answer. I hope Carlos Sainz isn't listening. But let's be honest, it's been a while since he's ever been fighting for a race, right? For Leclerc, it's still relatively recent. 2019 was the last time. But Carlos Sainz has never done this before, in Formula One at least. So could that be a factor?
Coincidentally, this is actually what he said about in the build up to the race. He actually said that the others who he's fighting with have been in this position before, and it's the first time he finds himself in this position in Formula One. So it very well could be that, having a title winning car or a title challenging car needs you to change your mindset, change your approach, bring in a lot more positivity and momentum. And I think he just needs to pick up momentum, because I think his recovery in 2022 and Mercedes joining the title battle could be the two massive strong points in the 16 races that remain this season, Samuel.
Seriously, it will be so much fun to watch 6 cars potentially fighting for wins, maybe even more, who knows. But I'll tell you one person who's not fighting for wins anymore, but is just being equally as thrilling, Valtteri Bottas, Kunal. And now, I was just kind of ignoring him all the way through, or rather, he was being ignored by the TV broadcaster initially, because the entire focus, rightfully, was on Perez, Verstappen, Leclerc and the likes. But all of a sudden, right, third quarter of the race, and you see, well, Valtteri Bottas is running fourth, and then suddenly it unraveled from there. I actually am still clueless, because there's no real article, there's no real update per se on what really happened to Valtteri Bottas. Was it just degradation and him not making that final pit stop that cost him eventually?
It was actually that, and that's what Valtteri said post-race. He said, my stints were too long for me to sort of keep drivers back. Now, imagine if Valtteri finished fourth. That would have been epic, because he was running fourth. There was a point of time he was also running third. So he was the only driver in the top 10 to actually go on a 2-stop strategy, right? And just how comfortable was Valtteri in his position? Closer to the end of the race, he actually asked his team if they should look for a pit stop, just so that he could go for the fastest lap of the race and then see if he could get an extra point. Now, when was the last time we've actually heard a Sauber or an Alfa Romeo car actually think of the fastest lap of the race? And one of the reasons why they decided against doing so was because the team thought that he would be extremely close to Ocon after he came out, and then sort of Valtteri just drove his own race, because there was a large gap to Ocon even at the finish. There was a 16-second gap between Bottas and Ocon, Samuel.
Yeah, and they made the right call eventually, but it's so great to see that Alfa Romeo are back in one sense, and I just hope that Zhou Guanyu can adapt quickly, because this Alfa Romeo just isn't deserving to be in this back half of the field. I just hope that he can get forward as well, because Valtteri Bottas just seems like a renewed driver. And what if there were 2 cars of that same nature up ahead? But for McLaren, Canal, it's a bit of a weird race, this one, because Daniel Ricciardo is struggling again. It feels like that narrative just isn't quite changing all the way since last year. And Lando Norris was physically struggling, but my word, did he pull out such a good race over here. His consistency was remarkable, and eventually to finish 8th with a really upset stomach is quite a performance. And when you consider the quality of the field around him too, I think that's one of the performances of the year that's just going to go under the radar, because nobody knows what it's like to be in his shoes at that particular moment, one would say.
Yeah, he actually had tonsillitis, Sommel. But yeah, the truth is he's been unwell all weekend. He started behind Ricciardo but finished ahead of Ricciardo, and that unfortunately just is not the best sign. Okay, yes, again, that's what happened. And the truth is that at the end of the day, Lando is driving his wheels off and his tonsils off in that McLaren. Let's hope he's going to be fine and in time for Monaco as well. But I think Daniel Ricciardo, this is the worst start to his season since 2014, since he actually joined Red Bull, right? So that's just how bad it's gone for Ricardo. And I remember, hearing Ricardo in his post-race interviews and stuff, and he has never sounded this dejected, or I would say he's always now been sounding this dejected, right? And the truth is, he doesn't sound like the Ricardo, the bubbly, chubbly guy. He's distraught, dejected, just heartbroken. And I really hope this is not the sign off that we're going to see from Ricardo, because Ricardo left Red Bull to go try and win races and try and get titles with other teams. He did magic with Renault. He, of course, has failed miserably with McLaren. And, on days when Checo Perez actually played wingman, Ricardo would have been like, yeah, that's my car and I'm glad I didn't drive it. But the truth is, maybe he would have still prefer to drive a Red Bull that's quicker, take Max Verstappen, challenge him the way he did back in the good old days. I don't know how this story is going to end, and I really hope it doesn't end with Ricardo, walking away and saying a goodbye.
Yeah, but I don't think that'll happen. He's too good for that. He will come good. That's what I'm thinking at some point. Again, there's no basis to this argument per se, but it's just another graduate from the Fernando Alonso school of bad decision-making, Kunal. But I don't know. I just want to take a second on this right here. How can you make a good decision? You can look at the resources of a team. You can understand what they're doing. Maybe have a lot of faith in the project. But as a driver, you can't control the car. And secondly, you can't also, even if you could control the car, you wouldn't be capable enough of doing that because there are so many people who know better. So in that sense, he's done wrong only in terms of his driving right here at McLaren. And at Renault, it was just unfortunate that the car didn't quite work out. It's hard, right? It's tough luck. And with Fernando Alonso actually coming out and claiming to be, well, he's actually welcoming Lewis Hamilton into his world at the midfield. It's kind of crazy to see how the stats could have been different if one move or one tire team change could have been different for either one of these drivers. But I suppose that's for later on. Instead,
I have to add a point there. You added 2 points.
Go for it.
The third point is the kind of money that's offered to you to switch teams, because that's also what I think Ricardo took into account. Why not? All of us are doing this for money. So why don't you go to the team that gets you the best money, and then the onus is still on them to keep giving you the best car. So, but yeah, anyway, I think enough of Ricardo. Let's hope that it goes there. But you said Fernando Alonso, and he actually said, I think, starting P5, P6 and finishing out of the points. And here I start P20 and I finish in the points. And he was overjoyed to have done what he did at his home race in Spain.
But Fernando Alonso, it seems like the inner kid is back again with Alpine. Yes, he might not be winning races, but there's a sense of excitement and joy over finishes like P7, P8, P5, because you can see how hard he's having to work for it. From P20, Kunal, this is outstanding. And secondly, his teammate as well, Esteban Ocon. Firstly, he's doing a great job to beat Fernando all the way through, but even his comeback was incredible to start outside the top 10 and to come back to finish where he has. Alpine are just spraying some mystery spray around here. They're just doing something really well in terms of starting behind and coming up. Again, great strategy, great comeback, and great driving all the way through. Their moves were fantastic, very, very cleanly executed.
They were, and they do all of this without having a customer team, Samuel, which is something that they have complained about. But overall, I think a very good race to see Alpines get a double points finish. I think that's the least that's expected of them, with with the fact that they're a works team after all, Samuel.
Yeah, indeed. And with Haas, you can't quite say the same, because with Haas, the expectations are slightly lower. But still, they still ended up disappointing us this weekend, Kunal, which seems to be the trend with them, unfortunately, this year. And I've again labelled them as the underperformers of the year because they've got such a great car. A car so good that both of their drivers were actually in Q3 for the first time since 2017 or 16, I don't remember. There's some stat that Crofty threw up a long time ago, and I'm sure soon F1 Stats Guru will come up with that rather soon. Maybe as soon as I say this on, because he's actually listening to our recording in real time. But the point is, close but no cigar once again, Kunal. They're just not able to make it work. Is it the same old Carlos Sainz theory of, oh, well, I've not done this since a very long time, so I don't know how to do it anymore?
Yeah. Sorry, it was a mid recording interruption. But yeah, talking of Haas, I think they just didn't have the pace in the race, and their strategy was all over the place, and that's what sort of cost them. Especially in the case of Mick Schumacher, they actually apologized to him, saying, "You drove very well, but we didn't do as well, with our strategies in the race." And they were also on a two-stopper, just as Valtteri Bottas was. And they were the only team to not bring upgrades in the race, and they still got into Q3. And it would have been something had they still scored a point. But yes, their decline or their downfall through the season has been fairly epic. They started the season being top 3 in the Constructors' Championship. And just by the end of the 6th season, they are down in the bottom 3 now.
Sorry. My apologies, folks. It's been 2 years. I still forgot how to unmute a mic again. Crazy how things happen. But Sundaram, F1 Stats Crew, has just brought up the stat once again. As I told you that he's super, super quick. Brazil 2019 was the last time that Haas actually got both their cars into Q3, and it's really strange to see what's going on right there. But I want to talk about Aston Martin for a second as well, because this weekend we thought that, well, with a brand new car, with a new package, and many might say a green Red Bull in a way, they might be doing much, much better. But hey, even if they have copied or may not have copied, whatever you think on that particular point of view, I think they haven't, because again, it takes time for all these designs to come into realization. But let's assume that they have copied, right? Even if you copy Kanan, it's just not as simple as that. If it's once again coming to realization that you can't just copy another person's car very simply and expect to go faster. There's so many inner workings that kind of differentiate all the teams and drivers. And with Aston Martin, it's clear this package will take time.
That's the thing. It's going to take time. And that's what both drivers are saying. It's our first race with this package. And, we are going to see how it goes, and we'll see how we sort of understand the package. And they had both cars out in Q1. Again, not the best of headlines. I loved how Sebastian Vettel was so shocked when he realized that the car was that he was out in Q1. And then the race wasn't any exciting either. I think Vettel, again, he finished 11th, but 15 seconds behind Tsunoda in 10th. And he again had done a two-stopper as well. So, at the end of the day, they just need more time in cracking the car. And Sommel, I believe they have copied the Red Bull.
Aha, and why do you think they've done that? Have you, Mike, cracked the code, Kunal? Sorry, I just had to get it in. Sorry. No, but generally, why do you reckon they've done that?
I have to crack another pun. The reason why the Aston Martin is green is because the chief technical officer, his name is Andrew Green, right? So,
oh, come on!
But
you've outpunned me.
And Andrew, or Andy as I call him, his favorite sport is actually cricket, and he loves fast-paced bowling. And he has actually had a chat with me about a cricket ball and how the aerodynamics of the cricket ball work when you actually throw it fast. Okay, that's because we were, of course, colleagues back all the way in Force India. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, we just have to give Aston Martin time, just the way Williams is giving Nicholas Latifi all the time he needs. And, I have a stat of Latifi's, which is that Latifi has again finished in 16th position, right? In this season, Latifi's either not finished a race, or he's finished 16th or 14th. That's all that he's had.
Well, it's a lot to write home about. It's good enough to secure another seat. Let's ignore the $15 or $20 million that he's putting into the team. But yeah, it's good results, right? It's good enough to make a driver get and earn a seat at a team like Williams in a prestigious Formula One World Championship. It's outstanding what he's doing. But on a more serious note, he actually ended up beating Alex Albon, who had a terrible weekend all the way through. Degradation seems to be the word in mind, Kunal. And the only thing I can tell is just don't dye your hair red before a race begins. I suppose that'll be the condition of his tyres at the end. Four stops is ridiculous.
Well, I don't mind it so long as it offers us all the entertainment. And he's in fact going to argue that his red head is what got him to score points in the last couple of races. So it was just probably a one-off. weekend for Alexander Albon and Williams, I hope.
Yeah, exactly. And F1 Stats Guru Sundaram, quick to point out that Williams haven't scored in Spain in the last 6 seasons. And when they actually did score, guess who their drivers were? Massa and Bottas. That feels like a century ago. But folks, the next race isn't a century away, by the way. It's Monaco. It's happening this weekend. And so the Monaco GP preview on the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits to Podium will be here rather soon. So stay tuned for that. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope you've enjoyed watching this, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to this one as well. And if you have, do the good stuff. Leave us a like, leave us a good rating, leave us subscribe, and all that other things. But folks, thank you for listening. See you for Monaco, and have a good time till then. Bye-bye.